When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger for thousands of appetizing ingredients that inspire countless mouth-watering meals. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices. Plus, extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with points. So you can get big flavors and big savings. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Hey everyone, it's Kavitha Davidson and welcome back to Sportly. In today's episode, I'm super excited to dive into an extraordinary story of resilience, athleticism, and the battle between mind and body. Our guest today is Nicole Teeny. She is a queer Lebanese-American filmmaker, an ultramarathon runner, and the host of the new 30 for 30 podcast series, Girl v. Horse. In this 4-part series, Nicole sets an ambitious goal to race a horse in a 50-mile ultramarathon, reclaiming her body after being diagnosed with epilepsy. The series explores not only her physical and mental training, but also digs into the history of humans racing animals and how Nicole's journey parallels the endurance that runners and horses bring to the race.
Your watch is ready, my watch is ready. Give us a countdown.
3, 2, 1.
I've been a runner my whole life.
Just survived the New York City Marathon! Woo!
It's what makes me feel alive. But a few years ago, I decided to do something possibly absurd. Try and outrun a horse. A story about my journey to chase a nearly impossible dream. To settle the battle between mind and body. And girl and horse.
Hi, everybody. We do have a runner here today. She's going to run with the 50-mile horses. Where are you, Nicole? She's right here.
50 miles against a horse. I got this. From 30 for 30 podcasts, this is Girl v. Horse.
So, Nicole, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much to you, too. Thanks for having me.
And Nicole is joined by her wife, Marielle. Marielle, thank you for being with us.
Of course. Happy to. Thank you for having us.
So very quickly, podcast just dropped. How are you doing? It's, I'm sure, been a whirlwind these last few weeks.
Yeah, it's really exciting. You put so much time and love and effort into it, and then you release it into the world and it's gone out of your hands. And it's exciting to hear people listen to it. That's just dropped today.
Mm-hmm.
So I've only had friends and stuff hear the trailer. So I'm so curious to what people are going to say of the full deal. It's exciting. It's nerve-wracking, and but it's mostly, joyful.
Joyful. I love that. Nicole, you have a background in media. You were the founder of Teeny Motion Pictures, and you've written and directed projects featured on Netflix, Sundance, Paramount Plus, BET Africa, and Amazon Prime. But is this the first project that you've worked on that is this intensely personal?
This is the first project that I've worked on that is this personal. My first documentary featured my brother and his Bible quiz team and the community that I grew up in, but it didn't have me in it, and it was largely focused on him and his crowd. But this is very intimate. It's not just a superficial version of myself, but it's me in some really tough times, and also a bit of my love story with Marielle. So it's got two very personal storylines. I don't know if it's possible for me to make anything more personal than this. This might be the most personal.
Yeah. And the love story really comes through when you first start talking about that first date that you guys had. It made me tear up. It's so, when the love comes through in the audio, it's really kind of a special thing. First of all, this idea to race a horse, you had a running background, but where did this idea come from, and what did this challenge mean to you after your diagnosis?
I originally came up with the idea to race a horse when I read the running book, Born to Run. So that's one of the most famous running books of all time. If you're going to read a running book, normally people are going to say, have you read Born to Run? And in that book, he discusses a scientific theory called the endurance running hypothesis and interviews a scientist. And the concept of the theory is that humans are the world's best long distance runners out of the entire animal kingdom. And we're the world's best long distance runners because we needed to have that skill in order to hunt four-legged prey. So we ran them down literally till the animals were died from exhaustion. So in support of his theory, he points out one particular animal that humans can outrun. And just kind of offhandedly, humans can outrun horses. And I was like, what? How is that possible? Humans outrunning? Like, no, that can't be true. That can't be real. And if so, like, it's got to be race humans against race horses, right? It's got to be those fast, speedy types. But according to the theory, like, it was a regular thing. Like, people needed to do this to eat. So it wasn't just like the Usain Bolts of the world, the Flojos of the world. So I'm also wondering as I read this, well, if a human can outrun a horse, like, could I outrun it? Like, as you read something, you kind of like internalize it and wonder, well, could I do it? And it sort of planted itself in my mind as a seed of, oh, wouldn't that be fun? A bucket list item of sorts. And then it wasn't until I was diagnosed with epilepsy that I kind of started to look back and think, I wanted to feel strong. I wanted to feel like I connected to my old self. And being a runner, a lot of that strength that I felt came from that experience running. And when I ran, I felt whole. I felt like my mind and body were in sync.
I wanted to ask you about that because you so brilliantly go back to Descartes a couple of times in the pod, theories about the mind and body being separate versus connected. But you've also said that, running throughout this whole process has helped you reclaim your body after your diagnosis. I've interviewed a lot of athletes, particularly women, who have talked about reclaiming their body through physical activity after experiencing major trauma or, a horrible life event. Can you just tell me the feeling you have, how you feel when you're running?
Running for me is very meditative. So when I'm running, I really do feel connected to my body. I feel like my mind can kind of take a rest and my body can lead. In some ways, I feel like I can think with my body. Like I can posit a question to myself that maybe my mind couldn't understand. Perhaps a problem that I'm trying to work out, whether it be career or personal life, etc. And if I'm not able to necessarily find a solution thinking about it, sometimes I'll go run on it. And running on it is sort of like sleeping on it for me, where I sort of internalize that question. And I think running brings some peace. And I don't know how, but I feel like it helps me sort of solve my problems. Solve not all of them, but it's a way of processing in a way that just the mind can't. And I do believe that the mind and body are very tightly connected. And I think using our bodies, we can find strength and find wholeness and sometimes find things about the world that we didn't, or about ourselves that we didn't realize were possible.
Right. And Marielle, I want to ask you, what's your initial reaction when the woman you love tells you she wants to race a horse?
No, yeah, I bet I will never ever hear that in my lifetime ever again. Nicole always has these wonderful ideas. I call her an idea generator. She's very creative. She has ideas that are out there, right? Like I always say, you have the ideas that stretch the limits and the boundaries, whether they're feasible or not. I don't know. I thought, of course, this is typical Nicole, right? Like I met her, she was a runner, she got me into running, and this is one of her ideas. And I think I was fully supportive from the beginning. I didn't realize how long of a journey that was going to be. Of course, there are ups and downs in that journey because it's a huge commitment and it takes a lot to run a marathon. Like statistically, right? A few very small percentage of the population does that. To do an ultra marathon,
Hmm.
50 miles, that's another thing. And against horses, that's another level of that even. So yeah, it was one of Nicole's ideas.
Yeah, just a regular ultra marathon wasn't enough of a challenge for you. You know, one of my favorite scenes in the series is when you go and you meet some horses in person, right? You're just among them. Did you have a background riding horses? Had you ever been exposed to horse culture? It's an interesting community.
I was not what you'd call a horse girl, though I was friends with many a horse girl growing up. I'd had minor interactions with horses, but definitely not recently. And I mean, I live in New York City. I'm a city girl, and these are giant creatures. They're powerful, they're mighty, and they have their own personalities. And when you're around them, you can kind of sense that. And they're a bit unpredictable. And I had some fear going into this around horses. And I'm sure that was also compounded by the epilepsy and seeing my seizures as like a wild stampede. So during the course of this project, I had to work to overcome that, because not only did I have to get medically ready to be able to race a horse, athletically ready, so train, I also had to get horse ready. So I had to find a way to be comfortable around horses physically, so like running against it, and also mentally, like overcoming that fear.
Yeah, when you describe in one of those scenes, it really sounds like, these are obviously beautiful and majestic animals, and you seem to have a real appreciation for them as beings when you're around them. But at the same time, they're your biggest foe. They're the thing you're competing against. Do you think that feeling connected to the animals in some way was important in your journey toward racing them and defeating them?
Feeling connected to the animal definitely helped me understand how to beat them and also understand more about myself. I had to learn scientifically what my advantages were over them. So I learned a lot about how they sweat and what makes them good runners and what makes humans good runners.
I think my favorite takeaway was humans are the best sweaters on the planet. We sweat better than every other animal.
See, yes. And our biggest rivals are the horses. The horses are really great sweaters themselves. So, I was like, okay, that's one reason, just reaffirmed why they're a great rival, that they have a competitive level of sweating, but we sweat best. So I was like, okay, I need to be someplace where it's hot. And that's also why it has to be 50 miles, because the race needs to be such that we are both pushed to the limits of exhaustion and pushed to the limits of having to sweat, having to utilize that sweating power. Because if it's just like 100 meters, there's no way I'm going to beat a horse. I will probably not beat most humans at 100 meters. I'm definitely a long distance person.
Well, yeah, and you talk about this realization in the course of your training that there is such a difference between running for speed and running for endurance. How did you have to adjust, not obviously just your physical training and your expectations, but kind of your mental outlook on racing?
When I first started training, I kept looking at my watch thinking, why am I going so slow? Is this because of the epilepsy? Am I just a slowpoke? Like, how am I getting this time? My time was significantly lower than what it had been before the epilepsy. And I worked with a coach, Coach Sarah Scazzaro, who's wonderful. And she taught me that with training for an ultra, you need to be able to go for the long run, even more so than a marathon. That time compounds. It's not just 25 plus 25. It's not 2 marathons. It's more than that, because you're running your second marathon having just recently ran a marathon. So you have to have this extra layer of strength. And for that, you have to save some reserve within inside of you. You can't just go out and give it all, because then you're not going to be able to make it to the end. So the concept of enduring felt very like it resonated with me on an athletic level and on a philosophical level when it came to the project. So that was like a place where I learned a lot about myself as a person, but also like what the human body can do. It's kind of remarkable. Like 50 miles was a lot to me, but there's people out there who do like 200 miles without stopping. It's crazy that the human body can do that. Again, very few animals can go long distances, and we have the capacity to keep going, which is not something I can say for many, if not all other animals.
We did an episode on ultramarathons several weeks ago, and we covered the Marathon des Sables, which is, I think, 100 miles through the Sahara, which I don't understand at all. But
wow. Wow.
The Sahara Desert. Split across 7 days, it's known as the toughest foot race in the world. Among the competitors is British veteran Duncan Slater, a 37-year-old double amputee attempting the race for the very first time. Participants come from all over the world. Alongside Duncan are 1,000 other runners from France, Morocco, the United States, Italy, Russia, and beyond. It's a marathon for boundary pushers across the globe. And it's a really big deal that Duncan is here today.
There's some impressive races out there.
And the world of ultramarathoning it's such an interesting sub-community, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a quirky bunch. It's not quite the glamour and glitz of like being a football star or a basketball star. You're going out there for the long run, doing one thing repetitively over and over by yourself for hours and hours on end. It takes a certain type of person to want to do that. And when you get a community of those people together, it's a fun, goofy group.
Well, a constant theme throughout these episodes is, you're not just testing the limits of your body in a vacuum. You're testing, your body post-diagnosis versus how you had experienced running before. The idea that your body might never go back to what it was previously, how did you deal with that?
Through running. So something that, not to get morbid, but 100% of people are going to die. It's going to happen to all of us. Mm-hmm. So to some extent, there's this level of reckoning that happened during the course of this project and during the course of trying to race a horse and after the diagnosis, of realizing that that's part of the natural cycle, is that my body won't be the same as it used to be. And like, that's okay. It was going to happen anyways, and it's going to happen to all of us. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad or a good thing. It is a thing, and it's a thing that is worth coming to peace with because it's going to happen regardless. And running for me is something that brings me peace and helps me find wholeness and find peace in the world. And so being able to run with those feelings and thoughts in my mind helped me really kind of come to terms with it and sort of like accept it. Of course, I still don't want to die, but I think that kind of helped me reappreciate my body in one way. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of sucks that it has epilepsy, but it also can do some pretty cool things too, like run 50 miles against a horse.
When you first started running again after your diagnosis, you did so alongside Marielle. First of all, what was it just like to have that support?
Oh my gosh, it was amazing. It was so amazing. It was doing my favorite thing with my favorite person. So I loved it. I always thought she would be a really good runner. She's very athletic. Marielle used to be a professional basketball player in Lebanon. Mm-hmm. And so she's got that vibe to her. She's very good. She's the one who gets us out of bed today to keep running. So it's really nice to do a hobby with your partner that you both enjoy.
Yeah, Marielle, you were kind of the training wheels for Nicole when she first started running again. What was it like for you to be able to fulfill that role?
It's an important one because it means so much to Nicole. And at the beginning of like the epilepsy diagnosis and figuring that out, she wouldn't be able to go out running. or she was scared of doing that. Even we were, like me, her parents, etc., right, of having her just go out in the streets of New York with the cars. Like, you never know what happens, right? Because we didn't really know. It wasn't controlled. You didn't know what was going to happen. So we started off by at least riding on a bicycle next to her. So I would cycle because I didn't run. And that gave us the opportunity of, one, spending time together, but two, also, of course, for Nicole, because she wants to run. But a bit of that is also a bit selfish for my peace of mind, right, as well. But all for Nicole, of course, because ultimately that's what matters. I felt like I was doing something that meant more than it normally would to just go out on a bicycle ride, because I was supporting her not just by making sure she's safe, but also allowing her to run and train, because she was training to run distances and go back to being her old self and achieving things, because it had taken a toll on her. So yeah, I just wanted to be part of that and spend time together, make sure she's okay, and help her.
Thank you. Again.
Did you notice ways in which your relationship evolved or changed as you would go out on these runs together?
Yes. One, for me, it made me relate more, understand what Nicole was going through, and also get to share a common experience together. So before that, she would go out with her running club, she would go out on her own. So we never got to experience that part together. And it makes a difference, definitely helping you bond when you're going through something, especially when you get to a stage where you're pushing yourself, you're pushing your body, you're pushing your mind, and you're doing that together. It's a lot nicer. And it can get boring, right? Like running 3 hours or whatever out there on your own. But when you have your partner with you, it's a very different experience. It makes it much nicer and enjoyable.
So we'll do these long runs together, and like Marielle said, they can get really hard or boring, and we'll hit like a hill, and maybe one of us will be like, oh, I don't want to walk, I don't feel good, and the other, come on, you can do it, you know. And then we'll switch turns being that person, especially during races. Like, it just helps to have a cheerleader.
Yeah. Well, so then, Nicole, you do eventually start running by yourself again. And I mean,
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger for thousands of appetizing ingredients that inspire countless mouthwatering meals. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices. Plus, extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with points. So you can get big flavors and big savings. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Hey, it's me, the Quenchies. I'm that late afternoon craving you just can't shake. Wait, what's that? Welch's Grape Aid? No! Made with real fruit and no added sugar, nothing answers the call of the Quenchies like Grape Aid. Got the Quenchies? Grab a Grape Aid in your juice aisle.
correct me if I'm wrong, but just from listening, it does feel like that is a major breakthrough. Was it just about now you can do this without needing Marielle beside you? Or is there something about running that, you know, makes you kind of embrace the solitude?
I love running with Marielle. It's really fun, and it's what we like to do together as a couple. But there is something about having the independence to run alone that's very appealing. Before epilepsy, I used to just go out for a run on my own when I needed to clear my mind, or when I just kind of wanted to find a little peace or transition from one type of thinking to another type of thinking. So like a work day to a relaxing evening, or even the opposite. I'm waking up in the morning, need to get into the work vibe. It's a nice way to kind of transition. So it also represents that kind of independence, you know, being able to go out alone. Kind of, it's wonderful running with someone, but at the end of the day, it's you are making your own body move. You know, you're moving your legs and you're moving your arms. No one was carrying me physically. So having that capacity to know that I can feel that independence in my body was really important to me. Being able to do 50 miles in the wilderness by myself meant something to me, because it meant that I could be alone, which was something that I couldn't be when my epilepsy was uncontrolled. So having the capacity to be alone became sort of a goal and became sort of a milestone marker of, okay, that means that I'm at a certain level of health. And so instead of just being like, oh, I just want to be able to be independent alone in terms of epilepsy, it helped to have one specific idea that I could run towards, if you will, and an image in my mind that kept me going. And so running alone in the wilderness to me symbolized like true independence and the capacity of having my epilepsy controlled.
Right. Without giving away too much, because we do want people to go listen to this wonderful series, how did the race against the horse unfold? And, what were your major takeaways from the moment you crossed the finish line?
Oh my gosh, it was so fun. I had no idea it would be so fun. Like, I went in thinking like, these are my competitor. Like, they're going down, these horses, like equine domination. But then when I was out there, it was just a blast. And, it took so much effort to try to find a horse ride that would allow me to join. So I was, are the riders going to be, trepidatious? Are the horses going to be okay? And it ended up being more than okay. And the riders were very friendly and the horses were very sweet. And it was a very tiny trail, but it took some effort to try to figure that out mid-course. But I'd say that was pretty special.
Yeah. Were there any particular moments in the field among the horses or, during production that really kind of stand out to you?
I can say one related to myself, but I would also like to share a moment about my sound designer that she shared with me. So we work in Google Docs and we, write each other notes like, oh, this is great, that, this needs work. And there was one spot that I was like, wow, this sounds really good. Like there's a moment where a horse is flying up an embankment past me. And it's like a very tense, scary moment. And I wrote in the doc, I was like, wow, this is really good, Michelle. Like, I really like the sound. It sounds so natural. And she wrote back, sometime I'll have to tell you about the time that I ran up the hill trying to record this. I was like, oh my gosh, she literally went out and like replicated the sound. I just thought that was like wild. She Foleyed it. So that was one thing that stuck out. That's not my own story. Habibi, are there things that you can think of?
Well, other than Nicole always recording stuff in our personal life, and I'm like,
I am going to ask you about that because that was not lost on me.
Yeah, I think that's a big one for me, and it took getting used to for quite a while.
Did you have an idea from the beginning, from getting your diagnosis, that you wanted to do some kind of audio project? I mean, you seem to have tape with your doctors, you have tape with your family members from very early on in the process. Was that just something that you had been thinking about? Was it an audio diary of some sense? What was your thinking there?
So I'm a filmmaker and documentarian by trade, but it's also part of who I am. So sometimes when I have like something joyous or also something difficult in my life happens, I process it by maybe recording it. And maybe there's this idea that it'll become something, but also it's also just a way of like active capturing, an act of sort of like containing an uncontainable emotion, whether that be joy or sorrow or more complex emotions. So I started recording very early on one sense, because I like to make things and maybe one day it'll be a thing, but also it felt intellectually bigger than and emotionally bigger than I could kind of handle and like wrap my head around. But when I hold up like a screen or a phone, something tangible is captured inside that device. And it is literally contained in 64 megabytes or a gigabyte. And that's something you can click and say, here's when it begins and here's when it ends, and this is how big it is. That's not necessarily something we can say about most of life. Mm-hmm. Most of life doesn't fit into 64 megabytes. So that's probably the biggest reason why I started recording, was just from a personal way of processing.
I call my parents.
Spoke to the neurologist. It's kind of hard to talk because I bit my tongue a lot.
I know, honey, I'm sorry. This is really a life-changing thing for you.
I was almost free.
It was official. I had epilepsy.
It's so scary.
I know. I'm really been scared for you. And just thinking, what does that mean for you?
I mean, obviously you'd already worked on this film about your brother, but was it difficult? Were there any kind of growing pains in getting family members and friends to agree to interviews or to be featured in such an intimate story?
For better or for worse, my family is used to my antics. And after I filmed my brother, they also got filmed and they've kind of gotten used to it.
That's kind of great. Yeah. Old hat at this point.
Yeah. I mean, Marielle sometimes would be like, do we need to record this? So not everything's recorded.
Mm-hmm.
And, not everything that's recorded is in it, but things get cut in the process.
Right. What was it like to be recorded while you were running?
It's tricky to get good sound because there's all that wind, right? So a lot of the tape that you record is like, well, that's not usable.
Nope, just not.
This is really a question for Marielle.
Ariel, what was it like to record your wife while she was running?
Yeah, it's part of this whole interesting recording your day-to-day life, and to what extent is it like too much, like recording, and to what extent is it actually like, okay, pragmatically, I'm like that. Okay, do we really need this? Do we not? And why am I holding the phone like while running? But I understand eventually, right? Like why all of this was really important to do. We would record on regular runs. We would record, of course, outside of running at home or at any something that's happening like a doctor's visit or so.
Mm-hmm.
But during the run and training runs and while she was running the ultra, I was trying to run a bit with her too and record some of that and share that. So it's a bit tricky to run and record, especially if trying to capture video as well, because it's shaking.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was definitely an experience.
Yeah, I have to say, as somebody who has been podcasting for a few years now, the quality, and 30 for 30 obviously does fantastic work, but the technical quality of what you guys were able to pull off here is really quite impressive.
Thank you. So there's a lot of like me going on runs and being like, Marielle, slow down. Okay, now go faster, Or like, I need your breath.
Right. Yeah. Can you record yourself running? Can we use your phone? Because this quality is better.
Your water bottle. I need your water bottle sound.
One of the things that I also loved is that you take a really active role at the...
Is your cold making it hard for you to get to sleep and leading to a bad morning? Switch to Mucinex Night Shift for fast, powerful, nighttime multi-symptom cold and flu relief. Mucinex Night Shift fights your worst nighttime symptoms to help you get to sleep and wake up ready to go. Mucinex Night Shift. It's comeback season. Use as directed.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
The end of these episodes in raising awareness about epilepsy, and even within the episodes, I learned more about how grueling the trial and error process is for finding the right medication for you during these episodes. At the end of the episodes, there are really helpful tips for what to do if someone you're with is having a seizure. How important was that kind of awareness and education to the project that you've done here?
It was very important to include awareness about epilepsy in this project to me. And it was also important to me to show it in sort of like a realistic way. So a lot of people have seen the movie The Exorcist, and that shows like a fake seizure. And there's movies that show seizures, and they're not accurate to how a lot of seizures go, but also B, there's like a lot of stigma around it. So there is this association of like demonic possession or intellectual disability. And these things are not connected to epilepsy at all. It's an electrical disorder. It's like having a blood disorder. Our brain works off of electricity, and sometimes that electricity isn't working as well. So including that sort of perspective of epilepsy was important to me. At the end of episode 1, we do discuss seizure first aid because a lot of people just don't know. It's not something that's taught. You might be taught CPR or here's how to put on a tourniquet, but people aren't taught about how to perform seizure first aid. And there's actually a surprisingly large amount of people that will one day have a seizure in their life. And so I do think it is worth including that, and also worth talking about, breaking the stigma.
The images that we have in popular media when people have seizures are the more exaggerated ones, right? But you do talk about auras aren't what I think we're all used to seeing when we see someone having a seizure. So how much does that hold back like overall education about it? But then also how does overcoming that stigma help the understanding of what these diseases are?
So I want to say like it was up until like the 70s that there was rules like people that had epilepsy couldn't go into movie theaters. And this century, there were rules that people with epilepsy couldn't get married. There was sterilizations. Some of that stigma carries over. And a lot of cultures think of it as like demonic possession. And that stuff ends up creating problems for individuals, not just in terms of like attitudes, but it crosses over into like work as well, because people think, oh, can they really do their job, or are they incapable? The thing about epilepsy, it's called an invisible disability. So if you're not in the middle of a seizure, like you don't know that anyone has epilepsy or that it's happening. So to some extent, like it's better and worse than what it appears.
Yeah, but I do have to say, even for me, I learned a lot through that journey about epilepsy. I knew just what any basic person would know, and I didn't even think that there would be some things like the auras or those things that were happening and still happen in different ways and shapes and forms, but I didn't even know about those. So you can imagine people who are further away from it on a day-to-day basis, how they could imagine that and why it's important to know what it is. Nicole is a very caring human being. Even if we walk on the streets of New York, you can see homeless people, or you can see people who are, you don't know why they're on the street, like passed out, and Nicole would stop for every person to and ask me like, do you think they're okay? Do you think we can do something? Because you never know what's going on with a person. You can make your assumptions, but Nicole really cares about everyone. So, and from her personal experience, she learns, right? So she can relate.
There's a scene where you have a seizure while you're on the subway and you describe how difficult it was in Times Square of all places to get you out of the train, but that there was a stranger, a woman who did help you. And I'm a born and raised New Yorker. I would like to think that we all do value when it's really necessary, being able to help a stranger out. Finally, I guess, what's next for you both as athletes, storytellers? What kind of projects are you looking forward to? Are you going to be running any more ultramarathons in the future?
Nicole was already, while she was, I can't remember what point this was, we went to the Grand Canyon and she was like, oh, I want to do the rim to rim to rim. So I think that's one of the projects on the horizon in terms of running.
We are doing the New York Marathon, which is in a month and change. And then we're doing the Disney Marathon, and we have a bunch of little races coming up. In terms of artistic projects, I am working on a screenplay, and I am finishing up another feature doc right now. So I've got a couple of other things in development. So gotta have lots of things, gotta have your hands in lots of pots and stay busy and stay creative.
Absolutely. Well, that's fantastic. And my apartment's actually on the marathon route, and we have a group that we've got a little cheering section every year. So I will be be looking out for you for
Yeah,
sure.
wave.
I will. Nicole and Marielle, thank you so much for joining me. It's such a beautiful story. And I think one of the things that I appreciate the most is stories that often do end in perseverance kind of gloss over how difficult the pathway there was. And you don't do that at all. And, you know, it's intensely personal. And I appreciate that so much. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
We really hope you enjoyed this conversation with Nicole and Marielle. Please go over to wherever you get your podcasts and listen to the full 30 for 30 series, Girl v. Horse. Thank you so much for listening to Sportly. Sportly is an Immigrantly media production. This episode was produced by Savia Khan and Shay Yu. Our sound designer and editor is Paroma Chakravarti. Our theme music was created by Simon Hutchinson. Other music by Epidemic Sound. Tune back in next week and every week after for more Sportly.